All right. Let's dive into something pretty crucial in the automotive world. ECE R10 certification.
Ooh.
We've got this really cool guide from Testups,
Okay.
and they actually help manufacturers get certified.
Oh, wow.
So it's like we're getting the inside scoop.
Yeah.
We're talking about a certificate that could let you sell your product in over 50 countries.
That's pretty impressive, right?
Yeah.
It's like a global passport for your product.
That's a great way to put it. That's the power of ECE R10.
Yeah. ECE R10 is all about making sure all those electronic devices in vehicles don't interfere with each other.
Hmm.
Think about it. Your car's packed with electronics.
Oh, yeah. Everything is electronic now.
Everything, from the engine control unit to the infotainment system. ECE R10 makes sure they all play nicely together.
Okay.
Kind of like an orchestra
All right.
playing a perfectly tuned symphony.
So no electronic squabbles allowed.
Exactly. No scrabbles.
But who exactly needs to be paying attention to this? It's got to be really complicated.
Well, it might surprise you. It's not just the big car manufacturers. Anyone developing anything electronic for a vehicle
Okay.
needs to think about ECE R10. Let's say you're designing a new digital temperature controller.
Okay.
Even something like that
Mm-hmm.
needs to be checked to make sure it doesn't cause any electromagnetic interference.
So it's like a test to make sure your gadget doesn't cause trouble.
Yeah. You don't want your gadget to be an electronic troublemaker.
What kind of trouble are we talking about here?
All right. Imagine this. You just installed a brand new, aftermarket sound system in your car.
Okay.
It sounds amazing, right?
Yeah.
But then you notice your brakes are acting a little strange. Or your anti-lock braking system is malfunctioning.
Oh, no.
That's a nightmare, right?
Yeah.
And it could be because of electromagnetic interference from your sound system.
Wow, okay.
ECE R10 is designed to prevent those kinds of situations.
So it's really about safety, too.
Definitely.
Does every single part get tested?
Well, ECE R10 covers a pretty broad scope.
Okay.
There are two main groups. Complete vehicles,
Right.
then ESAs. Electronic subassemblies.
Okay.
Basically, ESAs are any electronic components within a vehicle.
Mm.
So if it has wires and circuits,
Right.
it probably needs to be looked at in terms of ECE R10.
So even a simple digital temperature controller
Exactly.
would be an ESA.
Yep.
Interesting.
In our guide from Testups, they actually use that as an example. They
Wow.
even have this cool flow chart that you can use to figure out if your product needs to be certified.
Oh, cool.
It's like a choose-your-own-adventure
I like
for
that.
electromagnetic compatibility.
So let's say my digital temperature controller needs certification.
All right.
What happens next?
That's when the testing begins.
Okay.
There are two main categories of tests,
Mm.
emissions
Go on.
and immunity.
Okay, can you break that down?
Yeah, so emissions tests,
Yeah.
they're like checking how much electronic chatter your device is putting out into the world.
Right.
Is it staying within the limits?
Right.
And then you have immunity tests.
Okay.
Those check how well your device handles interference.
So it's about what it's sending out
Yes.
and what it can handle coming in.
Exactly.
I'm guessing they don't just politely ask the device, can you handle some interference? No, what do they actually do?
They simulate real-world electromagnetic conditions.
Oh, wow.
For example, there's a test where they simulate a direct lightning strike
Oh, whoa.
on the vehicle
Okay.
to make sure those critical systems keep working.
That's a pretty intense test.
Oh, yeah. It's intense.
And I'm guessing there are different tests for vehicles versus ESAs.
Absolutely.
Okay.
They're tailored to the application and the risks.
Makes sense.
Like, imagine you're testing a component that's right next to a powerful engine.
Right.
It would need to withstand way more electromagnetic noise
Right.
than something tucked away in the dashboard.
Makes-
So what's the reward for passing all these tests?
That's a lot of work.
Well, that's where you get the E mark.
Yeah.
It's like the golden ticket for your product.
Right.
It means you've met the requirements of ECE R10,
Okay.
and your product can be sold in any of the 57 UNES member countries.
Wow.
We're talking big markets like Germany,
Right.
Japan,
Yeah.
Australia, even South Africa.
That is a global passport.
It is.
It sounds like a lot of work, but the payoff is huge.
Right.
But isn't getting certified in 57 countries incredibly complex?
Well, that's the beauty of ECE R10. It's a single standard recognized by all these countries.
So it's kind of like one universal language.
Exactly. One universal language for electromagnetic compatibility.
I like that. So you don't have to navigate a bunch of different regulations in each country.
Exactly.
You just meet this one standard,
Right.
and you're good to go globally.
Exactly. It's like having one key that unlocks a ton of doors.
That is a great analogy.
But I'm sure you're thinking about all the paperwork.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Where do you even start?
Yeah, it's a little overwhelming.
Well, that's where our guide from Testups comes in handy.
Okay.
They break it down into 5 manageable steps.
5 steps.
I like a roadmap to eMark glory.
All right, I'm ready. What are the 5 steps?
So first, you need to figure out if your product even falls under this regulation.
Okay.
Remember that flowchart we talked about?
Yep.
That's your starting point.
Okay.
Then comes the design phase.
Mm-hmm.
You need to bake electromagnetic compatibility into your product from the very beginning.
So you don't have to fix issues later on.
Exactly. It's much easier to think about it up front.
Right.
The third step is the testing phase.
Okay.
We already talked about the different types of tests
Right.
and how rigorous they can be.
Right.
Then comes step 4, documentation.
Okay.
You need to gather all the evidence that your product meets the requirements.
So it's not enough to just pass the tests.
No, you have to prove you're doing everything by the book.
Interesting.
Oh.
Okay, so what's the 5th and final step?
All right, so if everything checks out, your product passes the tests.
Right.
Your documentation is all in order.
Okay.
You receive the official type approval certificate,
Right.
and you can proudly display that eMark on your product.
It's like a graduation ceremony.
It is. It's a big accomplishment.
Yeah, Testups mentioned something about an upcoming revision to ECE R10.
Oh, right. Revision 7.
Revision 7. What's that all about?
That's a good question. It's something all manufacturers need to be aware of.
Okay.
It's expected sometime in 2024.
Okay.
And it brings some pretty significant changes, especially when it comes to the frequency range for testing.
What's changing with the frequency range?
Well, right now, testing goes up to a certain frequency.
Right.
But with revision 7, that range is being extended all the way up to 6 gigahertz.
6 gigahertz. Wow. That's a big jump. Why the change?
The automotive world is becoming increasingly reliant on wireless technologies.
Oh, of course, yeah.
And those technologies, they operate at higher frequencies.
Right. Everything's wireless now.
Yeah. Think about Bluetooth, Wi-Fi,
Yeah.
GPS, keyless entry systems.
It's only going to get more wireless, I bet.
Oh, definitely.
Yeah.
Especially with autonomous driving and connected cars.
So this revision 7 makes sure that products can handle this more wireless future.
Exactly. They need to be ready for that electromagnetically crowded world.
It sounds like a lot to keep up with.
It is. It's a constantly evolving landscape.
I'm already a little overwhelmed.
It's a lot to take.
But also super intrigued by this 6 gigahertz testing.
Yeah, it's cutting-edge stuff.
It sounds like a whole new level of complexity.
It is.
What kind of equipment is even used for that?
That's a great question.
And what are some of the biggest hurdles for manufacturers?
We'll definitely dive into those details in the next part of our deep dive.
Okay, I'm looking forward to that.
But before we go,
Yeah.
I'm curious, what are some innovations in automotive electronics that you're excited about?
Ooh, that's a good one.
And how do you think they might be impacted by ECE R10?
Let me think about that for a second.
Yeah, no problem.
I'm already buzzing with ideas.
That's great. I'm excited to hear them.
And I can't wait to hear more in part 2.
Me too.
Until then, listeners, you can join me in pondering that question too.
Yeah, great idea.
See you next time.
All right, see you then.
Welcome back to our deep dive into ECE R10 certification.
Glad to be back.
We've covered a lot,
Well, yeah.
from the purpose to that global eMark.
Right.
But let's bring it back to the listener.
Okay.
Imagine you're finally ready to launch that electronic gadget. You've poured your heart and soul into this.
Yeah.
You're ready to share it with the world.
It's an exciting time.
But there's one crucial step,
Uh-oh.
ECE R10 certification.
Right. That's essential.
And as we mentioned before, documentation is critical.
It is, yeah.
It's not just passing the tests.
No.
It's about proving your product meets the requirements.
It's all about the evidence.
So let's dive into the paperwork.
All right, let's do it.
What are we talking about here?
So first up, you need a detailed product description.
Okay.
This is where you introduce your creation to the certification authorities.
Right.
Explain what it does, how it's used, any special features.
So first impressions matter.
They do, even for electronics.
What else goes in this resume?
You'll need technical drawings.
Okay.
Showing your product's inner workings, dimensions, materials, components.
It's like giving them x-ray vision.
Exactly. They can see how it's designed.
How do we prove our manufacturing processes are good?
That's where quality management certificates come in.
Okay.
Like ISO 9001.
Right.
These show you have strong procedures in place to make sure the quality is consistent.
So it's like a stamp of approval.
Yeah, you're showing them you're serious about quality.
Okay, so we have the product description, technical drawings, and the quality certificate.
Right.
Anything else?
Not quite. We also need a control plan.
A control plan. What's that?
This outlines how you make sure your products consistently meet those ECE R10 requirements
So consistent.
throughout the entire manufacturing process.
So it's like a recipe.
Exactly. A recipe for electromagnetic compatibility.
I like that.
It details the ingredients, the steps, and the checks to ensure a harmonious outcome.
So you're not just meeting the standards once.
You're building them in.
You're baking them in.
Exactly. From the start.
What else is in this electromagnetic cookbook?
Well, it outlines the tests you do,
Right.
the acceptance criteria, and what you do if something goes wrong.
So you're showing them you're just getting lucky.
Yeah.
You're doing it right consistently. Okay, what's the last document we need?
The conformity of production agreement.
What a mouthful.
It is.
What's that about?
This is where you promise to stay compliant with ECE R10 throughout the entire production life cycle.
So it's a long-term commitment.
It is. It's about maintaining that compliance over time.
ECE R10 really is about trust and accountability.
It is. It's about ensuring those products with the E mark actually meet the standards.
Okay, let's talk testing.
All right, the fun part.
Can you walk us through the process?
So testing happens in these special EMC labs. They're like electromagnetic proving grounds.
Okay.
They have the technology and controlled environments to simulate real-world conditions.
So they're recreating what a vehicle might experience on the road.
Exactly.
But in a controlled setting,
Yes.
what kinds of things are they testing for?
They test for things like radiated emissions,
Okay.
immunity to electrical fast transients, and surges.
I'm picturing a room shielded from outside interference
Yeah.
with antennas and high-tech equipment.
You're on the right track.
Oh, wait.
One common setup is the ALSE,
The ALSE.
absorber line shielded enclosure.
All right. What is that?
It's a room with special walls that absorb electromagnetic waves. It creates an electromagnetically quiet zone.
So it's kind of like an anechoic chamber for sound.
Exactly.
Interesting.
There's also the TEM cell.
Tim cell.
It's used for testing at lower frequencies.
Okay.
It's like a miniature electromagnetic playground.
Like that.
Well, you can control the electromagnetic field very precisely.
And what about the open area test site?
Oh, the OTS.
Yeah, the OTS.
Those are outdoor sites.
Okay.
They have large, flat areas used for testing at higher frequencies.
So it's like taking your product out for a test drive.
It is. In the electromagnetic wilderness.
So many different test setups.
There are, yeah.
It depends on the product and the risks, I'm guessing.
Exactly.
So we have the documentation and the testing to validate the performance.
Right.
But with revision 7
Yeah.
and that extended frequency range,
Right.
things are about to get even more challenging.
They are. Revision 7 is pushing the limits of EMC testing. You're going to need even more sophisticated equipment and expertise to handle those higher frequencies.
But as we'll explore in part 3,
Yes.
there are companies like Testups
Yes.
that can help.
Absolutely. They're experts in this field.
I'm eager to hear more about that.
Okay, great.
But what's the most challenging test you've seen?
Ooh, that's a tough one.
I know you've seen a lot.
I have.
What really puts a product through the ringer?
One that comes to mind is the bulk current injection test.
Okay, what's that?
This test simulates a sudden high current surge. Like what might happen if a car battery short circuits
Oh, wow.
or gets struck by lightning.
So it's like the extreme cases.
It is. It can really expose weaknesses in a design.
Not just everyday electromagnetic noise.
No, it's about those rare but intense events.
Makes sense.
That's why ECE R10 is so important.
Yeah.
It makes sure our vehicles are not just advanced, but also resilient.
All right. I'm ready to learn more about these companies.
Okay, sounds good.
Let's continue our deep dive into ECE R10 in part 3. Welcome back to the deep dive. We've made it to the final part.
Part 3.
We've been through so much.
Yeah.
All those documents,
Right.
those intense tests.
Those tests are no joke.
But getting that E mark,
Yeah, the E mark.
it's not easy, is it?
It's definitely a challenge.
What are some of the biggest hurdles manufacturers face with ECE R10?
Well, one of the biggest ones is just understanding the regulation itself.
Right. It's pretty dense.
It is. It's very technical.
Yeah.
especially for smaller companies
Right.
or those new to the automotive world.
It's like learning a whole new language.
It is. It's like electromagnetic compatibility ease.
I like that. What are some other challenges?
Even when you understand the requirements,
Hmm.
putting them into practice
Right.
can be tough.
Yeah.
It takes expertise, special equipment, resources.
That can add up.
Oh, it definitely can.
And then there's revision 7.
Right.
With that extended frequency range.
Up to 6 gigahertz.
That's going to make things even more complex.
It is. It's a whole new level.
What kind of equipment do you even use for that 6 gigahertz testing?
You need specialized equipment that
Okay.
can generate and measure signals at those high frequencies.
So more precise.
Much more precise, yeah.
What are the hurdles with that?
Well, one of the biggest is accuracy.
Okay.
At those frequencies, any little interference
Right.
can mess up your results.
It's got to be tricky.
It is. It's like trying to thread a needle in a hurricane.
Wow. I can imagine. What else?
The way electromagnetic waves behave
Okay.
changes at higher frequencies.
Hmm.
They reflect more, they deflect more, they get absorbed more.
Right.
It's harder to predict what they'll do.
Okay. So it takes a lot of know-how.
It does. It's a real challenge.
What happens if a product doesn't meet these requirements?
Well, first of all, it can't be sold legally
Right.
in those 57 US countries.
That's a huge chunk of the market.
It is a huge market.
What else?
You could have costly product recalls, damage to your company's reputation,
Right.
even legal trouble
Oh, wow.
if your product causes accidents.
Okay. So the stakes are pretty high.
They are. It's serious business.
So how can manufacturers make sure they're doing everything right?
That's where companies like Testups come in.
Okay. Our source for this deep dive.
Exactly. They can help.
Really? They can. They're the expert.
What kind of services do they offer?
They do pre-compliance testing.
Okay.
So you can catch problems early on.
Right.
They consult on design and testing to help you optimize your product. And they even offer full certification support.
So they can handle the whole process.
They can, from start to finish.
That's pretty helpful.
It is. They're like a one-stop shop.
Like having a guide for a really tough climb.
Exactly.
Any advice for manufacturers just getting started with all of this?
I would say don't be afraid of ECE R10.
Okay.
Think of it as a chance to make your product better.
Hmm.
Higher quality, more reliable, safer.
And remember, you don't have to do it alone.
There's help out there.
There is lots of resources and experts.
So what's the most important thing for our listeners to take away?
ECE R10 is essential.
Okay.
It's not just a box to check.
Right.
It's about making safe and reliable products.
For the whole automotive industry.
Yeah, it's about making sure those electronics work together.
Keeping us safe on the road.
Exactly.
Well, this has been a fascinating deep dive.
It has.
Thanks to Testups for the great guide.
Yeah, they're a great resource.
And thanks to all of you for listening.
Thanks for joining us.